Hello and welcome to another episode of Test, Optimize, and Scale. It is a distinct pleasure to have Borys Pikalov here with us today, co-founder, chief analyst over at Stobox. Stobox, one of the leaders in the space of asset tokenization and one of the most professional companies to work with, can attest to directly. Borys, pleasure having you on today.
It's a pleasure to be with you on this podcast, and thank you for inviting me.
Of course. And thought we could begin with your history before getting into the world of STOs and tokenization and everything you guys are doing at Stobox. Would love to familiarize the audience with a bit more of your background.
For myself personally, I have probably an unusual background for the entrepreneur because I'm coming from the academia, and previously I've been studying theoretical physics in the Kyiv University, and for many years, even before the high school, I thought I'm going to build the academic career. And what attracted me the most about it is intellectual challenge and the desire to make a significant contribution to the world. What I found, however, is that I want to do a contribution that is a bit more practical and the results of which I would be able to see in my lifetime. I also would like something probably more diverse in terms of challenges and areas of application. And this led me to shift into the commercial field. And this is when trying different industries and seeing what I can do, I met Jean and Ross, my co-founders, and we jointly started Stobox to work on this space that we found very exciting. And to be honest, back then, in late 2018, we had very little understanding of the industry and the market. We had enough knowledge and to some extent just a feeling to understand that this is pretty significant and there is a lot of potential there, but we didn't have an idea about how really significant it is and how much potential is there on one hand, but also B, how many challenges, operational, technical, legal, and others have to be solved to get it done. And I believe it's a very typical story for among entrepreneurs.
Absolutely. Working with founders every day. Sounds like more of the common case than not. I want to talk about some of the obstacles, some of what you guys were able to overcome with positioning. Starting budgets, I know, is generally something that gets brought up with the startups that we work with. But what first got you into the world of cryptocurrency? What turned you on to the overall future of tokenization? And ultimately the creation of Stobox. I know you wanted to work on something more practical and coming from the world of academia, but when was the light bulb aha moment for you that you knew this is the vertical that I'm going to focus on?
So initially, when we started, I didn't yet have this decision set in stone. So this was more about experimenting and seeing what exists in the industry. And the initial pull that got me here was just understanding of the size of the assets that can be moved on chain. So it was pretty clear from the beginning that transactions with assets happening on chain are more efficient, and eventually, be it in 5 years or 50 years, everything will move on chain. And when there is a migration of hundreds of $trillions in assets, there is probably enough space for everybody interested to participate significantly. So this was the initial pull for me to join. But the point in which it clicked and when I understood that I'd like to stay here is when I understood the philosophy behind crypto and how it resonates with me personally. Because for me, crypto isn't only about the technology, it's also the change of culture and change of philosophy. And for me, it's about the more equitable distribution of wealth and power, because the problem that historically with any kind of organizations, they were extractive in the sense that wealth would concentrate and decision-making power would concentrate on the top. And that's okay, because we didn't yet understand that more inclusive institutions are more efficient, and we didn't have the modern moral theories of universal human rights. But now we have evolved, the society have evolved to the point when we understand that organizations which exist in a more decentralized way, they are more efficient from the perspective of decision making, lower overheads in terms of management, and that the society in which the wealth isn't concentrated by a few people on the top, but distributed more equally by everybody who participates, is a better society. Not only from the perspective of economic growth, though it's also the case, but also just as a better place to live in, with a lower poverty, lower corruption, and everything. And this understanding in the world can be substantially better. This is when it clicked, and I understood that this is a problem. Maybe I won't be able, or it won't be solved during my lifetime, but definitely something that I'd love to contribute to.
Absolutely. That's what it was for me as well. And I know we've had conversations like this for the entrepreneur context. But originally, decentralized currencies, what that created for trust and person-to-person transactions, starting to learn all the different scenarios where this could be beneficial. But what really resonated was the access to capital that disenfranchised, startups were being granted, and the access to deal flow for investors to get involved early stage and have the type of growth potential that angels, VCs have historically been able to utilize. Furthermore, projects that were leveraging digital distribution and therefore expanding at a far more rapid pace than other types of fields, which I know I could appreciate on the tech side. Love how you mentioned culture as well and everything that comes along with it, and getting to experience the culture just around, let's say, Web3 conferences, and seeing the individuals who are living this decentralized lifestyle and traveling from location to location, and the community that came out of it. It's very remarkable, even just within the business community, and projections on where this could go in the next couple of years, 5, 10, is quite exciting.
That's exactly the case, and that's why we are here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I know it's a big part of your mission, is to create a better infrastructure to provide millions with that type of access to capital.
Yes, that's right. That's how we frame it now. It took us time to come to that specific wording and this clear idea what we are doing, and especially given that we have different team members with different views. So initially it was less about intellectual understanding and more of a feeling. There is some cool stuff happening, cool stuff technologically. We all love innovation and love technologies, cool stuff culturally, but this specific vision of what exactly we can contribute, it took time for us to understand, and it evolved as our value proposition evolved. So this is part of what you asked initially about the challenges. One of the primary challenges was figuring out what is it that the market wants and how to unlock it, because it's one thing to understand theoretically that this might be beneficial, and other to actually package it into a commercially viable offer. And I'd say it took us 2 years to figure out what the market wants, and this is when we felt a switch to flip, and our marketing finally started to work. So initially, we saw ourselves primarily as a technology company focused on providing the technical solution for issuing token that would be compliant, and the platform that would satisfy all the requirements of the participants. Initially we saw ourselves as a centralized platform, kind of like a blockchain-based crowdfunding platform on a private chain. Over time, we found out that for many reasons it doesn't work for us, for two primary reasons. One, technically supporting private chain for a relatively small provider is just unfeasible and it wouldn't make sense. And probably it also isn't necessary, because our primary idea was that it's better from legal perspective to have private chain because it has higher control over the transactions, but we figured out that everything can be implemented on public chain, and they are a more robust and trusted infrastructure. We decided to shift there. So this was one. And second, legal. If we wanted to operate really globally, and this is our aim, we would need to acquire a license in basically any jurisdiction in which we want to operate. And this is, and even acquiring a license in a single jurisdiction would be quite financially heavy at that point. Doing this in 20 jurisdictions is definitely unreasonable. And the challenge many of our clients are facing too. We currently have clients from Europe, US, Canada, Mexico, from all 5 continents, also from Brazil, from countries like Cambodia, Philippines, Australia, Kenya. And we obviously couldn't do that if we were a centralized platform. So we shifted to a bit different model in which we would offer our platform on a white label basis, where it would be a separate platform for each client. And in this case, they offer their own tokens on their behalf. And this is still regulated, but not a licensed activity. There is a difference between being regulated and licensed. And this allows them, even though it still has to be done carefully, it allows them to operate globally and attract investors from potentially dozens of jurisdictions, which is one of the goals that we have. So this was one major change that made it easier for us to operate. And it happened in the late 2019, early 2020. But it wasn't the end of our search. I'd say it was still only a start, because we still had we still didn't feel that kind of response that that would allow us to close significant number of deals. We still didn't feel that we click with clients. And the reason was that tokenization was just something too new and too scary for them. And when we had conversations, they were very rarely about technology. These were conversations like, what kind of token should I offer? How is it regulated? What kind of requirements I need to comply with? Even who can be the kind of investors I would offer this token to? Which return should I offer? So a lot of questions that typically tech companies don't need to answer. And it took us some time to build this, but starting from late 2020, we added to our pure technology product, we added consulting and legal services. We built the team. We did, I don't know, thousands of hours of research to understand how to answer all of these questions, to build a structured product where we would hold clients' hand and they would go from start to the end in the form of token offering. And this is when it started to work. So in 2020, we closed maybe like 1 or 2 deals, while in 2021, we had 20 deals. And one of the reasons, obviously, that we started more active marketing, we started playing with ads, but also we saw much better conversions because our offerings started finally resonating with clients. So this is when we have found product market fit, and sometimes it can be quite a long journey.
Love that transformation from private chain to public, what that allowed for, and in the topic of law and compliance. I'm going to get further into that as well, too, because I want to speak about trust and what security tokens ultimately allow for. But being able to have that visualization, being able to service groups from different geographical locations, but through your white label, know that you are operating in a very safe way, in a way that follows all the rules. Again, trust is such a big issue in this space. I recall early crowd sale formats, especially when we were getting involved in the space around 2017, and they were associated with words like scams and, pump and dumps, rug pulls, and found the extra levels of setup, the extra levels of audits and processing for security tokens was able to create a whole new dynamic for more of a trusted digital asset versus what we'd see with ICOs or anything that was leveraged in the past. I really look at it as an evolution from those early mechanisms, and being able to look at the secondary market, long-term liquidity, what it allows for versus the historical angel investor, and some of the gray areas that they were participating in seed capital or A rounds of the past. I really do believe in STOs and the adoption in the years to come. So I think you guys have positioned perfectly within that space to be able to create these digital assets, even with real estate, which I know is a major part of your client list.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for us, real estate is 60 to 70% of our clientele. So I believe that over time, more and more industries will adopt tokenization. But the initial market that kickstarted this, I would say that in big part kickstarted this movement, is real estate. And on the issue of trust, it's a big one because there is trust on so many levels that has to be ensured. I continuously tell our clients that if you want your raise to be successful, building trust with investors is the key requirement. Everything that you do in your marketing, be it your interviews, your Q&A session, the content you generate, creating community where some investors can ask other investors. One of the main reasons why it's necessary is trust, because when investors initially see you, you're just a random dude on the internet, and you're asking people for sometimes for quite a significant amount of money. So you need to do quite a lot of heavy lifting in terms of building this trust in order for people to give you money they maybe worked many months to earn, and which is not that easy for them to give away. But that's only the one level of trust, which is personal and you being able to execute. There are also trust in a more technical meaning of the term, which is trust in the integrity of the register of transactions. And this is a big thing that blockchain is solving. So what financial system is about in general is about tracking different forms of value and obligations, be it money or be it securities. These are just claims that some people have towards different people. And we need to continuously know that this ledger of obligations and assets corresponds to how it should be. And in Web2 world, so to say, we delegate this housekeeping function to intermediaries. But with this, we also give them power, and we give them possibility to charge heavy fees and to some extent control the financial system. And blockchain is about maintaining this ledger, basically each of us contributing to some extent to the maintenance of that ledger. And this is not only about maintenance in terms, and now we're going to next level of trust. It's not only the trust that there were no malicious change, there are also trust about legal compliance. And this is part of what you started speaking about, that even if all actors have a goodwill, some transactions are just prohibited to happen and lead to an incorrect state of this global register of assets and obligations. And so the next level, what we need to do is to have legal enforcement on possible transactions and states of that ledger. And surprisingly, to a full extent, this hasn't been done by anybody yet, either by us or by our competitors. A lot of progress have been done in terms of documenting some levels of compliance into the smart contracts, but on a full level, this hasn't been implemented. And this is part of what we are doing in the next 12 to 18 months. We want this to become really scalable and a mass market solution. And when this happens, we won't be able to devote that much time in consulting and legal to each client separately. But it's still important for us that they remain compliant. And if previously the reason why we didn't do this on-chain encoding of compliance isn't because it wasn't necessary or possible, but when we have much closer communication with clients, it just isn't necessary, and there are many other things we can spend resources on. Now, to make the next leap to the scale part of the cycle, we need to make this automated.
I like how you welcome basic regulation, but some level of scrutiny to
Mhm.
create a safer environment for all sides. I believe that still very much fits into the decentralized vision and overall ecosystem, but weeds out bad actors and
Mhm.
prepares the vertical for mass adoption, which is what we all need.
Yeah, the problem with regulation isn't that regulation is unreasonable. It is that enforcement of regulation is done by a fallible actor. And this actor has to be controlled and kept accountable. And this actor constitutes of humans who sleep, who have biases, etc. And so if we can have at least some of these rules done on chain, to reduce the degree of bias and increase the efficiency of enforcement, then we will then we take away power from the institutions that can potentially abuse them, because generally the civil society is a constant struggle between government and society kind of needs government to create rules, but also doesn't need government to be too powerful. And this is what we're doing with blockchain, is having a bit more efficient control of such actors. For example, one idea that I like is having all information requests recorded on chain. That is by default. This a small detour. What we want to do and what we need to do to enforce compliance is on-chain identity. And the way we do it is using soul-bound tokens proposed by Vitalik Buterin, when each person would have a non-transferable NFT, which this is what soul-bound token is, with their encrypted personal data like first name, last name, etc. And what the way I envision it in the future is that there is a permissioned access to this data, and when each instance of access would be first, it has to be signed by, also is governed by some rules. For example, it has to be signed by the court officer and by the, let's say, enforcement officer, so at least by two governmental actors. And B, each of these instances is recorded, if not in the fully public record, that at least in something that is very auditable. And in this way, now access to data doesn't become something that is done by CIA or FBI behind closed door. We can at any point see what they are doing. So I believe it's like control and regulation isn't when, so freedom isn't when nobody controls nobody, but rather when everybody controls everybody in equal amounts. This is kind of a more complicated view of freedom that we need to adopt if we want to live together as a species.
Transparency.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone controls everyone versus a few controlling everyone. And like you said, those are people. Even putting in the hands of AI, various types of obstacles that could be presented there. But it's going to be exciting to watch it all grow. And I know you guys are at the forefront, have very large holdings, and at the same time launching these different projects. Are there any success stories for Stobox that you could share, just to give the listeners an idea of the magnitude of what's taking place using your technology and how you're making an impact into the ecosystem?
Sure, we do have a few successful clients. The success rate is about the same as with any other type of fundraising. So at least yet, we haven't arrived at the point when there is massive difference in success rates between tokenized and non-tokenized rates. So I would say a big part of the value comes to be realized after the race, when you see trading happening. So in terms of the success races, we do have a few clients. One is a Mexican client, and what they did, they raised $1.5 million for construction of local villas in Tulum, which are quite an attractive business because this is a good tourist destination, and they have a very sophisticated approach to this. So for example, they did these villas using architectural principles employed by Maya in their pyramids. So these are really visionary people who see this not merely as another real estate business, but as something that is embodied with deeper meaning. So they see it as a place where people come to decompress and unite with themselves. They want to in these communities, they call them not merely villas, but communities. They want to do different kinds of lectures or rituals to allow people to really connect with the nature. And this is one of the things that I love about our business, is that many of our founders aren't here merely for business and money, but also doing something interesting and giving a unique spin. Another interesting client, they raised also a bit, probably a bit more than $1 million. They want to do sustainable mining powered by solar energy. So as you know, Bitcoin mining has been under attack from ecological perspective because it wastes a lot of energy and produces emissions. But at the same time, this is still something that we need as a society, as a more decentralized way to store value and do transactions. And obviously, banking infrastructure also does consume a lot of energy. So this would be necessary to do a more fair comparison. But what they want to show is that Bitcoin can have the best of both worlds. It can be ecological, and it also can be decentralized, and this is what they do using this green mining powered by solar energy. This client also wants to gradually transition to operating as DAO. So they also embrace these principles of decentralized operations. And we have some larger deals. We generally are the average target amount of our clients is between 3 and 15 million. This is kind of the average spot, but many of these deals either haven't launched yet or haven't gotten a significant traction. We also have a few mega deals of 100 million and more. One of them launched almost 6 months ago, didn't go through. The clients, this was a kind of client that had misconception about the market, and they believed in build it and they will come. So they didn't pay significant enough attention to marketing. And they can still resurrect this deal, but I'm not sure they still have the energy for that. And a few other deals that haven't launched yet. For example, one for construction of the industrial park in one of the emerging market countries, and this is in order to stimulate local business. Another is building a manufacturing facility in Middle East. So we see, even though most our clients are still serial entrepreneurs doing something relatively small scale, we see a small scale. We see some interest from clients that have larger resources and larger ambitions.
Funny how you bring up the marketing aspect of it. I have such a fascination with groups similar to Solby on your platform with over 42,000 token holders, and then hearing about other groups that were not able to get the distribution out. I know that's where I spend my late nights and early mornings, is determining how to reach target audiences, take them down a marketing funnel, have the educational process there front and center. I find, it's very needed in this space for mass adoption, as we discussed, but also for the experts, for the enthusiasts. They want to know what's underneath the hood and really be able to tell what's going on, not just a surface level description on one of these communities or anything having to do with a tech platform. It's creating its own security. That there needs to be in-depth scientific breakdowns of when, if, what type scenarios, let alone create a strong enough understanding for the audience to not only absorb, but to be able to repeat to their friends, their family, the people around them. So I find the content has to do a good enough job. The advertising, the outreach, any type of earned media has to be able to accomplish the same thing. I love how you pointed out the not a build it and they will come scenario. I talk about that a lot on the show here. So they say great minds think alike. Definitely some of the same messaging that we're getting out to our communities. But I'm a big fan of what you guys are doing, because I've watched, countless panels on STOs. We've participated in investor marketing there many times ourselves, but the actual idea versus execution really position you guys at the forefront and beyond just the concept stage.
I dearly appreciate your kind words. And that's true. What we notice in the feedback from our clients is that one of the reasons they sign with us is that sometimes we are one of the few providers who can actually explain deeply how tokenization works, what are the actual and perceived benefits, and do it in terms of the very detailed breakdown. Often clients come to us after they see our YouTube videos, and historically YouTube was one of our most important, if not the most important, marketing and content marketing channel. So it's almost always the case that clients watch at least a few of our videos because signing with us, because it allows them to build trust and understand that we actually know what we are talking about. Because you're right that the tokenization is a very complex product, and it's maybe not such a big deal when you're selling something simple, but specifically with products like tokenization, doing heavy lifting of education is a must-have if you want to have business. And that's what the investment in education has really paid off with almost every client I have been speaking with. And there's another point that you mentioned about marketing. That's actually a way in which I am fascinated with the work you're doing, because I guess there is no one else who is that deep into the best practices of investor outreach. And to be fair, I sometimes feel myself guilty for not paying enough attention to that aspect of tokenization. So we are very focused on legal challenges and technical challenges and all others. And that's why we don't provide that much support in terms of marketing as we would like to our clients, even though this is super crucial. So it's actually good to have partners like you who can support our clients with that aspect, because with everything that has to be set up and happening, I feel like we can't yet properly address it, and it requires that intense focus that you had for the last 7-8 years on building this. We are obviously working on assisting our clients as well, and specifically on building community. So one of the goals previously our marketing has primarily focused on B2B acquisition, so that we have more good assets to sell. And obviously, and additionally, our logic was that if we have more clients who do broad marketing, then they would attract investors who would invest in our other clients, so they would help us with building community. And this does happen to some extent. The marketing that our clients do indirectly benefits us, but we see that if we want our clients to be more successful, we need to take a more active role in that. So I'd say in the next few years, we would also be focused not only on educating businesses, but also on helping investors learn about, firstly, technicalities. How do they invest in token deals? How do they evaluate token deals and due diligence? How do they understand which deals are good for them specifically? Because the problem with investment advice on the internet is that it's not targeted to the specific individual in their specific situation. So how do they give investment advice to themselves, so to say? And also, we would tell them about what clients we have, obviously staying within the legal bounds of not acting as a broker or advisor. This is a fine balance to strike, but to create this community where our clients can market themselves to prospective investors who know how to appreciate these deals. And this would later also be useful in creating secondary market and liquidity, because one of the biggest selling points of tokenization is liquidity, the fact that assets can be traded. But liquidity doesn't happen automatically and magically. We do provide technical infrastructure for the liquidity to happen, which wasn't possible before, but there also have to be actual people who would be interested in trading these assets. And this does require marketing.
Trading the assets, long-term liquidity. I get to speak on these topics at blockchain real estate conferences. And I really believe that's where the marketing is going to be needed more and more and more. I'll use the word adoption again. And it's very much to me a marketing play. It's a marketing vehicle where doing a launch, How do we get the awareness from our target audiences, from the marketing? How do we position within our industry, from the tactics that we're using within these larger strategies? Again, who is the audience? How are we reaching them? How are we bringing them in at much larger numbers than we need? When I picture 42,000 token holders, I'm picturing, a minimum of 10 times the amount of traffic to get it there, likely 100 times the amount of traffic to be able to secure that amount of conversions. And I think that's a big misconception from founders, from early stage marketing directors who are working on these projects, that word of mouth alone is going to close the round. And get enough token holders integrated into the market, where I don't find any of this to be an accident or a coincidence, as much as a finely executed marketing strategy across a list of tactics. And even with our internal team, which I look at the volume of campaigns they've worked on, and I'm not familiar with other groups in the space who have done more successfully at that. When I look at our audience databases, all of these are excellent tools, but I still subscribe to the larger ideology of test, optimize, scale, of course, hence the name of the podcast. But it really is not a one size fits all model of do these 5 things, you're going to raise millions of dollars. You're talking about, tens of millions, hundreds of millions on some of these campaigns. We've worked with exchanges and brought in billions in assets under management. And it is not just a rinse and repeat type of model as much as a new strategy each time. And we have assumptions going in, but we need the data from the tests to show us what's working, show us what's not, showing us what we need to change up, we need to optimize. And you've obviously had a lot of success at this with Stobox, with the groups that you are able to, may I say, partner with in their growth and their success. What recommendations would you have for founders in terms of what they can test? I call it marketing, but at the same time, it could be applied towards any aspect of entrepreneurship, things that they could test out for their product, or like you said, some of the legal constructs. What could they test out towards their overall growth?
So my general suggestion is to test everything you believe about your business, your product, your market. Perceive it not as facts, but as assumptions with certain degree of uncertainty about them and certain degree of importance of these aspects. And most likely, especially if when you're starting, you would need to test everything. And this is my general approach in business, especially when starting new projects, to list a set of hypotheses that need to be true in order for this to work, rank them in terms of importance. For example, which hypothesis would kill the idea and which would simply make me go look into it from another perspective, and just test them one by one. And typically, for example, product management books advise to, at least good ones, advise to break down the stuff that you need to test into 4 groups. This is the value hypothesis, that is whether you can create the value for your users. It's the demand hypothesis, that is whether you can generate enough demand for this value. It's technology hypothesis, but that is whether you can deliver this for, and you can actually build it. This is less a concern for standard SaaS startups, but this might be a problem for some blockchain startups that operate on the cutting edge of technology, for AI startups or for hardware startups. And 4th is a business hypothesis, that is whether you can make it into a business with a positive unit economy. This is more from the product management perspective. If you're speaking more about marketing, so you probably have some idea about who your customers are and why they would want your product, but most likely you're wrong, or at least to some extent. And the sooner you know where exactly you're wrong, the better. So you need to test who are the audience who would be interested in buying your product, why they would be interested. That is, what value do they find? If they do find value, can they stick in the long term to getting this value from you? So does it stick? This is the main factor of product market fit. Test the when you establish that, you can start testing whether your channels, if you tested that this is even something people need, you may start testing whether you can acquire people at a decent return on ad spend or marketing investment, whether your positive unit economy is good. If not today, then at least on the range of 1 year. For example, if you don't use channels that have direct performance marketing like ads or sales. But this is also there is also a trap here, because we see many startups that remain unprofitable even in 6-7 years after the setup, because their unit economy is fundamentally broken, but they believe that some magical economy of scale will fix the stuff that doesn't exist. So you need to be open to asking yourself hard questions as to whether it will really become better in the long term and whether these factors are realistic. So this is in terms of testing whether your basic unit economy. Then you would be testing the scale, how much your unit economy deteriorates when you start investing more in marketing, because obviously all marketing channels deliver diminishing returns and you would have to create new ones, but to which extent they are diminishing? And do you expect that with this level of that your economy will start breaking when you grow twofold or tenfold? Where is the ceiling in your current business model? I like how Reforge, one of the top growth companies focus on growth management education, how they speak that a good business strategy is the one which knows its ceiling, which knows, will it break when we grow 2x or will it grow when we break 10x? And hitting the ceiling unexpectedly is a sign of your business strategy not being well thought enough. This is a bit embarrassingly something that happened to us in the around a year ago, when we understood that with the current business model, when we are not cheap enough to be available for a mass market, but also not expensive enough to work with pure enterprise clients and live happily from very high margins, we are in the middle where we can't grow more, but there is not enough revenue to but at the same time we aren't we can't grow more by acquiring to put it differently, we aren't cheap enough to grow by acquiring small clients, and we aren't sophisticated enough to acquire enterprise clients, while in the middle we hit the ceiling in terms of the number of clients we could potentially acquire. And this could have been foreseen, but we probably became too focused on the day-to-day minutia and didn't understand that we were approaching this point. And so we obviously understood that our business model has to be changed at some point, but we didn't forecast that it will come that fast.
The learnings, that's where it all comes from. And you're talking about the economies of scale. You're talking about diminishing returns, finding something that is actually working. I want to then take the optimization question from there. So you find channels that are working for you. I always look at it as traffic sources and a funnel. The funnel could be as simple as one conversion event. Traffic sources could be as simple as word of mouth. But for us, it's often paid advertising because it's very consistent. We go after exact audiences. It's longer funnels with more touch points. That's how I find most audiences convert. In many cases, it takes a good amount of tests to find something that works. And like you said, it's likely not going to work. That's based on statistics and based on the concept of, the first thing you come out of the gate with likely needs some optimizations. But I want to take it a different route. 2022, 2023, considered a crypto winter, just to put it broadly, by many. You guys have seen growth during that period. How can founders, how can marketers optimize what is working for them, or what is not, and finding the right scenario, but to place more emphasis right now on what is working during changing market conditions? How can you manage to a point of effectiveness?
So obviously, crypto winter does require you to become leaner. It requires you to become much more considerate about how do you spend your money. And that can be a very good thing. We cut our expenses by around 35%, and we cut the most inessential stuff. And it happened to and it happened to lead to almost no loss in terms of productivity and what we can accomplish. So it was actually to some extent good for us. But in terms of growth, it was tough. And we did find that the demand has fallen, especially in the last summer. Closing deals was super tough. So and we the three founders, everyone became obsessed with marketing and sales. So this was something that was always important to us, and we spent a big part of our time. But now, instead of spending, let's say, 40 to 30 to 50% of the time, it became somewhere on the range of 70 to 80% of the time. We started emailing existing clients, reviewing our CRM, and just trying everything we can to keep us afloat and keep growing. The biggest contributor to growing revenue was actually increasing revenue from existing clients. And that's often an underappreciated source of growth, because very often we focus on acquiring new clients, but they are much more expensive than existing clients. They need to be found, they need to be persuaded, etc. And increasing the revenue from existing clients is almost a low-hanging fruit in many cases. And this is something that you actually should expect. If you are improving your products and services, if you are becoming more sophisticated and creating more value, then it would be strange if you couldn't get more revenue from your existing clients. Obviously, it does depend on how often you're needed and your business model, but very often a sign of actually improving what you're doing is your capacity to earn more or engage more with your existing customers. So for us, it was, we actually found that increase in price almost doesn't impact conversion rates. And so it was because the problem with conversion wasn't the price, it was just in the crypto market. So we just plainly increased our prices the first time in 1.5 years. We started offering additional services to existing clients, and so we've got additional engagements with them. We just took our old CRM and started emailing every client we ever had to see what else we can do with them. And this has proven to be helpful. In terms of marketing, we, especially ad spend, what we did, first we optimized the countries we are targeting, because our targeting before was too broad, and we found that there are a smaller number of countries that delivers the best. So previously we didn't breach marketing and sales data enough, and this is when we started focusing on that more. So by bridging that, we have found that some jurisdictions, such as North America, for example, have much higher conversion rates than some others. And so we switched off from the marketing campaign all jurisdictions from which we haven't signed a single client, and when we had low lead scores. So this was one of the saving factors. We also a bit reworked our funnel so previously we would lead clients directly to the website, and from the website to the sign up form for free consultation. Now we started leading clients with ads to the content, like the lead magnet, from the content to email, from email to free consultation. Even though this funnel is longer, because it allowed us to build some trust with clients before invited them to subscribe to the consultation, this also happened to work good for our conversions. So these kinds of small optimizations helped us to stay afloat and increase revenue. I would say part of and we, by the way, almost doubled our revenue in 2022 compared to 2021, despite the market decrease. So, and I would say part of that was just good momentum from 2021, because the winter started in summer, And so Q1 and Q2 were still very good and growing from the previous years. When we experienced real decline was Q3. So part of that was merely momentum from previous year, but part of that was a lot of these optimizations and leveraging existing clients to uncover the source of resilience we didn't know we have.
That's where it all happens. I want to note all of that out and type it for listeners, share it with my team. That does it. It wasn't, hey, somehow we grew in 2022. It was emailing everybody you'd ever talk to. Hey, what else can we be doing together? It's changing the infrastructure, modernizing it for the current market conditions, going at length there. And I point out the most active founders have the most successful campaigns. So the fact that you guys weren't victimized by the market, but instead look for advantages within it. We're in the listening for what your audiences wanted. I think optimization is really where it all takes place. And I measure marketing talent really as problem solution type tests, where anyone can launch a campaign, anyone can launch a company, see it work, and be able to stand proud on the results. But what do you do when it's not happening? What do you do when there are forces externally that are affecting results? I think is what separate. And Borys, as we begin to wrap up here, want to ask, what are the tips? What are the secrets for scale? And of course, what final messages do you want to leave listeners with here today before we get into contact info for anyone who would like to continue the conversation?
I'd say as follows. Firstly, in order to scale, you need a very solid foundation. You can't scale if you haven't nailed your business model and your acquisition channels. You would merely waste money. Initially, when we only started working on this, we wasted a few $100,000 because we didn't have a solid foundation. So this would be my lesson number one: be very clear that you have tested and verified to the significant extent your hypothesis of value of business model and growth. So this would be one. Second is continuous learning. Don't become complacent with growth, because it's continuous battle against chaos, against new competitors launching their campaigns that drive down your conversion results. It's customers becoming tired of what you're offering and perceiving it as something more commoditized. Scale isn't something that you just launch once, use the same channel, and it works well. It is continuously reinventing yourself. It is foreseeing that your current main channel, for example, ads, will probably become inefficient in 12 months, and you need to develop, for example, content marketing or virality if you want to continue growing from there. So probably point 3 would be good strategic planning and foresight. And 4, it isn't always necessary, but it's just the reality we need to be aware of. In many business models, capital is necessary to achieve scale. It isn't always, and I'm a fan of bootstrapped businesses. We haven't raised ourselves capital for quite some time. So I encourage founders until they reach the stage of scale, when they are on the scale of actually building and figuring out their product market fit, maybe be careful with fundraising. But when you know that it's time to go to scale, you would probably need capital, and you need more than you expect. So come to this is a bit of advertisement also. Come to us, come to Jason, and find the capital you need in order to scale properly.
Absolutely. And that is where I see many projects fail under capitalization with the right findings from their hypothesis, from their tests, from their actual data. Borys, I definitely recommend folks get in contact with you. What is the best way for them to do so?
The best way would be to actually fill in the consultation form on our website, stobox.io, or email me at bp@stobox.io. I'm also available on LinkedIn, but I'm less responsive there. So email probably is the best channel.
Excellent. Excellent. And again, definitely would take Borys up on that invitation. Borys, thank you so much for coming in, sharing your knowledge, how you've been able to see growth at Stobox, where the industry is going, and also tips for founders who are going to be launching with you, going to be launching this industry as a whole. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you for the amazing conversation and wish you all the success.
Very appreciated. Want to thank everybody for tuning in as well. We'll see you next time.